It's here, No Debate Sports, waiting on my guy DJ Triggs to show up. And today we're here. We're live every Monday, Tuesday, 7 o'clock Central. And waiting on my guy DJ Triggs. But let's kick it off tonight. So we got some week 2 games to review. We got some Monday night action to go over. We got some Monday night action going on right now. We got some injuries to cover. And we got some weird things going on late in games that we definitely want to talk about. So right now, and we're waiting on my guy DJ Triggs to show up. He'll be here shortly. And but let's start with what's going on tonight. So right now we got some Carolina Panthers action. We got some New Orleans Saints stuff going on. And then it looks like we are right at 7 o'clock. So we got some Pittsburgh Steelers and Cleveland Browns game going on. So pretty interesting stuff. Right now with the Panthers and the Saints, low-scoring game, but definitely some guys we want to keep an eye on. So looking at this game from the Saints' perspective, at what they were successful at last week. So we started to see Rashid Shaheed become more of a part of that offense. We started to see that he is part of the kicking game as well. So he returns kicks, returns punts, pretty good all-around player. But where he scored last week was really in the end zone. So he had that really nice crossing route across the back of the goal line last week, and he did really well with that. And if we look at it from the Carolina side of how things are going on with Shaheed, there we go. Yeah, there we go. Now we're together. Now we got everyone. Woo! Little worry, Triggs.
I don't know what was happening. It literally would not let me in. And then I don't know. It was like it told me my devices were not connected. And I'm like, but my computer, the camera is built into the computer. So I'm like, I don't know why I'm not connected. And then all of a sudden, it just kicked me in.
I know that's exactly it. But we got Triggs here. We're ready to go. We're all on board. Boom! It's Triggs time. Let's do this. Here we go.
Sweet.
So, yeah, good stuff. So,
weirdo.
Yeah, it is Triggs time. You know it. Here we are. Yes, sir. He's here. It is officially time. He's not late. We're all early. There we go. It's Triggs time. That's how we do it. Exactly. So, yeah, definitely going over a little bit of some NFL, some of the Monday night action going on right now at the moment. So we got Carolina Panthers, Saints going on right now. I think we got a general idea of what's going to transpire there. But I'm switching over my television here in our Shindig No Debate Sports studio and switching over to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Cleveland Browns game. Because I think that game is going to be more intriguing, more competitive, have more playoff implications than what we got going on with the Saints and Panthers. So that's how I feel about it.
That makes sense. Yeah, I would probably never watch that first game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely intrigued with the Saints side of it, more from the aspect of, I was talking a little bit earlier with Rashid Shaheed, of how he's kind of a new blooming receiver, had a really nice end of 2022 season. And already in 2023, he's already got a touchdown to start the year. So I like what's going on there. My concern is if we look at it from the Panthers side of what they did last week. So last week, Carolina played Houston. And even though Houston has tons of problems up front with their offensive line, looking at the receiving core, John Mechie is the guy that's kind of playing the slot. Didn't really have much production there. So, and there are parts of Carolina where I did watch that game last week where I noticed that Carolina does have somewhat of a stingy defense. So I was wondering if Carolina actually has good nickel corners. And are they giving some problems to a guy like a John Mechie? So how does that transpire this week against Rashid Shaheed, who is in an offense that is definitely better than CJ Stroud's? But are those problems going to resonate again against a slot receiver in Shaheed?
That was complicated.
Exactly.
Like, I mean, I guess I don't really think of it too much just because I don't expect either one of those teams to matter when it comes to like real like playoff implications. I have a soft spot for the Texans, but
yes,
I don't know. Carolina's just they're so bad. Like
they are
so bad that they're not on my radar at all.
Yeah, I know, and I know you invested significantly in the run game between Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard, and that might be the best part of that entire offense is both of those guys. So pretty rough stuff there, but it is what it is. So yeah, I don't think that team can score points, and I think of this team as like the Arizona Cardinals back when they had Josh Rosen, and then they followed up the year after and got Kyler Murray. I could see that happening again. I don't think this team can score any points at all. And what's to say that a team picking first overall who just drafted a rookie quarterback last season doesn't just do what Arizona did back then and says, screw it, let's get Caleb Williams. We drafted Bryce Young. He stinks. Let's get Caleb Williams. I see that kind of stuff absolutely happening with whatever team falls into the lowest position.
Yeah, I guess so, but Carolina's just they're so hit or miss that like CJ Stroud this past week, going into the games from yesterday, he looked okay compared to like other quarterbacks that are out there. A lot of the rookie guys looked okay. So like I don't see Houston investing in a top quarterback. Arizona has Kyler Murray on their books, so they're kind of stuck. Carolina just invested a top pick in their guy. So like I don't know. It's one of those weird years where I'm like, who really goes out and gets a quarterback right now? I don't know.
Yeah. But the thing is with Caleb Williams is if he was in this draft or the draft the year before, he would absolutely be the number one quarterback selected in each of those drafts. And he's going to do it again next draft as well. So I know these teams have certain young quarterbacks, but if you are the worst team in the NFL, you're going to say, I'm just not going to pass on Caleb Williams. That is a generational talent. And you got to get a guy that can go out there and actually run an offense. He can conceptualize a playbook. He can ad-lib on the field. He's a generational talent. We can't say that about anyone. Maybe CJ Stroud is really good, but already we're seeing Justin Fields is really starting to slip up. Anthony Richardson can't stay healthy. CJ Stroud looks pretty solid, but has no protection whatsoever. And I think that's a really major downfall. I mean, I do like that he threw for 300 yards. I thought he had a nice game against Carolina, but him not having that protection can definitely play against him as well. So get a guy who is just going to ball out regardless. And in a way, Kyler Murray did that with Arizona when he got there. So that's where I feel that getting a young, awesome franchise caliber quarterback that is going to hit, and as opposed to rolling the dice on everyone we've seen to this point, these teams that finish at the bottom, they're going to do it.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, they're going to be forced to. The only team that really is intriguing to me is probably the Bears, but that's just because I'm a Packer fan. No, and the Bears look like they're horrible. But I don't know. To me, like Houston, I think Houston's set. I think India's set. The time that Richardson's been out there, he's been like dynamic compared to everyone else. Carolina's probably the only one, but it's not just their quarterback play that's horrible. I mean, they have old receivers who aren't that good. Like their run game is non-existent.
Questionable.
Their offensive line is non-existent. Yeah, right. Their defense is meh. So like, is bringing another quarterback going to really help them? Probably not. I don't know.
If you get Caleb Williams, that does. If you get Caleb Williams, you have the best quarterback in the entire division immediately. immediately. And I have no problem saying that. You bring in Caleb Williams, you're going to light it up.
I like Derek Carr. Derek Carr is a rookie than Derek Carr, like day one. It's probably going to be
I like Derek Carr's
down some years, but I don't. Carolina is going to be horrible for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I like Derek Carr as a person, but you put Caleb Williams on Carolina immediately, and I will take Carolina to win that division outright, just flat out outright. There's not a chance that Derek Carr is going to outplay him. Derek Carr couldn't even outplay Patrick Mahomes early in his career, and we're going to see Caleb Williams is going to have that Mahomes-esque kind of style to him, where pretty much we're going to see 1-2 games be like, yep, this guy is flat out a baller quarterback. So that's where I'm getting excited about this and saying, hey, wherever these bottom teams are, they're coming. And I mean, I think of this more of like almost from an NBA perspective, where I feel we're definitely getting to the time where we're about to enact a lottery system, so that you don't have this weird tanking situations going on. I mean, like, shoot, we can just start off with my team, my Raiders, and it's almost looking like flat out we're tanking now already in our second game of the season. I mean, we almost had no business winning week 1 against the Broncos, but in week 2, we put up a nice lead with Davante Adams and Jimmy G, and then we go out on the field again and we throw an interception at like the 20-yard line, and Josh Allen's out there, and Josh Allen's off to the races, and that's it. And we already have no Jacoby Myers, and even Davante Adams gets hurt later in that game. And then looks like all of a sudden Buffalo just figured out how to run the ball. So it's like everything is cooking on all 8 cylinders for the Buffalo Bills this year. So that's exactly what we're seeing right there out of them. So yeah, and James, you're right. I mean, like, flat out, like, Josh Jacobs ain't looking like a bona fide athlete at the moment, and that's completely legit. I mean, we have a bad offensive line to begin with, and then on top of that, there's just no real threat passing the football, and you can almost bank some of it on the fact that, like, hey, if there's no chemistry between Adams and Garoppolo, then we can stack the box. And they're going to start stacking the box against Jacobs. And these little plays of him in the backfield, well, now teams are reading it like a book, and they're just positioning their defense in motion as they see Jacobs go in motion. So now our offense is completely stale, especially without Jacoby Myers, no Hunter Renfrow, very little Davante Adams, and very little tight end play at the moment. So, yeah, you're going to see no offense, and Jacobs is going to burn you like he did. So there you go.
Yeah, that's the problem, is like when you're so dependent on 1 or 2 players and other teams are getting smarter and getting better and you're just staying the same. I mean, Jimmy G and Derek Carr are kind of the same quarterback, except Derek Carr had chemistry with Davante Adams, and some people don't understand that chemistry is a big deal.
It's vital.
Like we overlook coaching, and or we talk about coaching and stuff. It throws everything into like a weird off balance situation. Departed. So yeah, he's getting him the ball, but he might not be getting him the ball in the exact spot that Davante Adams likes.
Yeah, exactly.
Or in a certain 5 reception Hooper with a couple. Hunter Renfrow got one. Amir Abdullah got one. Mayer got one. Like,
Uh-oh. Oh, you still there, Triggs? There we go. Cool. But yeah, it's just way too spread out. It's pretty rough out there, and things need to change. I mean, personally, I'd like to see Aiden O'Connell out there sooner than later. So if they can pull him out there and let's get this offense rolling and see what it's made of for the young guy, let's take it from there. So that's kind of what I'm seeing there with that. So yeah, that's what we got. Looks like we got Triggs waiting on him. But yeah, so that's what we got there. Let's go to another game. An up and coming receiver that kind of has that Devontae Adams esque in Garrett Wilson. So Garrett Wilson with the Jets, no Aaron Rodgers, but still gets an absolute dart thrown to him from Zach Wilson in that game. So that's about the only highlight we got out of the Jets and the Cowboys. But flat out, anyone going up against the Cowboys, if you are not an elite offense and cannot threaten them, it's just not going to happen. Oh, there we go. Everything good with the connection, Triggs? Everything good with the connection, Triggs? Just trying to get some connection issues here figured out. So, okay, there we go. Cool. But yeah, I was just talking about the Cowboys Jets game, so that's one we can easily skim over. I think the next game we can go to, Triggs, is your Green Bay Packers and the Atlanta Falcons, and how that game was looking pretty much like it was in the bag for Green Bay. But what happened with that game?
Yeah, that's a game that I wish we could take back.
Exactly.
I don't know.
I mean, it seems like there's that good connection between Samori Toure and Jordan Love, and I think Toure ranks up there highly now with the progressions of Jordan Love. I mean, I would say it pretty much goes Dobbs 1, and then he starts looking at either Toure or Luke Musgrave in his route trees. But I don't know. Like you had really good Samori Toure action going on. But then after that, late in that game, somehow Atlanta storms back. And then when it came to that like minute mark in the fourth quarter, when you really have to execute and at least make a shot at getting to midfield to make the kick, Jordan Love just couldn't get it done. Overthrowing guys, a little bit under pressure. And it seemed like his completion percentage was much lower than usual. So just didn't really look too hot with Jordan Love towards the end of that game. So yeah, that's kind of what we got going on there. We'll hit up another game now. So let's go to let's check out another game. So another game we had going on yesterday, we had Cincinnati and Baltimore. So this is a game going on that Triggs and I both picked Baltimore. And yeah, it was interesting. I think it's really showing really that like last year's results are last year's results and this year's teams are different. So I think Baltimore is looking much better as an offensive line. I think there's better pass protection for Lamar Jackson. He looks more comfortable in the pocket. He has better targets to throw to. It's not just Devin Duvernay and Mark Andrews essentially run around the field anymore. The run game is more complementary, regardless of who's back there, whether it's J.K. Dobbins or it's Gus Edwards carrying the rock. So you got that. You got some trick plays going on from Zay Flowers. So things are looking really, really solid with the Baltimore Ravens. Pretty good stuff there. So yeah, we got that. And then Cincinnati, like, things are still looking bad back there. Still looking bad with the offensive line. Jamar Chase is absolutely getting more coverage and more attention this year than he's ever gotten before in his career. And that's throwing Joe Burrow for a loop. It's really forcing him to really make further progressions, but doing it in a short amount of time, not being as mobile as he was at the start of his career. It is tougher sledding with the Cincinnati Bengals this season. Still no real big bona fide games out of Joe Mixon. So it's interesting. We'll see what kind of goes on with that run game they have there in Cincinnati. But to me, and we'll see what happens tonight with this Monday Night Football game. By the way, check it out. Browns are wearing white helmets on white uniforms. It looks fresh, totally fresh. We'll have to post about that later. But with that, I think both these teams tonight are going to end the season better than Cincinnati. I really don't see anything truly exciting about Cincinnati. It's a bad-looking defense, bad-looking offensive line, more coverage on Jamar Chase. And I feel like these other teams have more juice. They have more excitement. They have better defenses, better personnel, better offensive lines. Every team in the division has a better offensive line than Cincinnati. So definite things that we're seeing here right now. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. But yeah, so my guy Triggs is having some technological issues at the moment. So we're just going to keep moving along, keep churning out games here. And there we go. So that's what we see in the Baltimore game. Yeah, so a little interesting there. Lot of different moving parts, but I would expect that those other three teams are actually going to look better than Cincinnati as the season goes on. So there we go. So let's go to another game. Another game we had going on this week was the Chargers and Tennessee. So you had both teams playing in this game, really scoring a lot of points, really scoring well. You really had the offense of the LA Chargers really looking good. But yet again, they lose another close game and another high-scoring game. So pretty bizarre what's going on there. Yeah, just a lot of weird stuff. I mean, still you get good production out of Justin Herbert. Still looking at a 300-yard plus game. 2 scores, pretty solid there. You had an injured Austin Eckler in this game. So for those people that owned Eckler, definitely got to get Josh Kelly, but even Josh Kelly didn't have that big of a day. So not the best there, but definitely the slot produce. And Keenan Allen is a bona fide number 1 receiver that plays the slot for the LA Chargers. And he absolutely had a day. He had 2 scores and 100+ yards receiving. So huge day out of him. On the Tennessee side receiving, we saw their outside receiver, Nick Westbrook-Akine, do a lot of damage. Well, at least have a touchdown. Not much in the yardage. You had more yardage out of Traylon Burks. You had DeAndre Hopkins kind of contained, but still had about 4 targets on the day. But that's how it was there. I mean, if we're looking at the Chargers side of it, their receiving core, their passing game, way more threatening than what Tennessee did. So pretty tough sledding there with what they got. So yeah, pretty tough sledding there. A little bit of production though out of the run game out of Tajay Spears. So 8 carries for about 50 yards out of Spears, a target here and there throughout the game. But pretty much Derrick Henry's your workhorse. I mean, they will run him into the ground. Got 80 yards on the rock and a score. So it's kind of what we saw out of that game. Going to another game again that we had yesterday. We had a low-scoring Jacksonville game between them and the Chiefs. But the wild thing in this game is that 4 touchdowns from the Jaguars were goal line touchdowns that were basically at the back of the end zone. So we know Zay Jones had 2 that were right at the edge. Christian Kirk had 1. And then late in the game, Calvin Ridley had 1 that he was just a few steps out of bounds for. So even though this was like a weird low-scoring game out of Jacksonville and Kansas City, I think Jacksonville truly is the better team. I mean, I know they're both 1-1, but just kind of the way that things went, and granted, you didn't have much time to really prepare for Chris Jones coming back for the defense of Kansas City, so that totally changes things. He is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Just totally different with how things are going on there with that Kansas City defense, and now really providing more pressure against opposing quarterbacks. So you have that going on there, but I just feel like that dynamic offense of Jacksonville is really, really going to take off. And maybe the fact that that offensive line for Trevor Lawrence isn't the greatest, so he's got to force things a little bit more, is going on. But I think as more time progresses, you get more comfortable with your protection, as bad as it may be. And then you start to figure out that chemistry when you get tight in the position of the field where you have a very short amount of space to work with and you can execute those throws. So they have a ton of targets, a ton of mouths to feed. But I feel like that's something they're absolutely going to practice. They're absolutely going to hammer it. And should this matchup occur in the playoffs again, I think Jacksonville just runs away with it. This reminds me of when Cincinnati was playing really good games against Kansas City, that it was just a really good matchup. Last year, it wasn't a good matchup for Trevor Lawrence going to Kansas City, but this game was close. This game was closer. But if you actually convert those touchdowns, I think this game could just totally go the other way in favor of Jacksonville. So really interesting stuff you had going on in this game. So there you go. So we have that go on. We'll bring up some of the Thursday night action. So Thursday night, we have the Vikings and the Eagles with a home game for Philadelphia. Flat out DeAndre Swift just running all over the field with tons and tons of yards before contact. Pretty much the main thing that you want to attack with Philadelphia, if you have that running back core, is know who the number one running back is going into the game. I would say the number one running back, should everyone be fully healthy, is Kenneth Gainwell. Kenneth Gainwell was making huge progressions in training camp, in the preseason, and he is the lone returning back from 2022 along with Boston Scott. And Boston Scott is more of a situational kind of a player. So Gainwell has the real trust and respect of that team. And Miles Sanders is pretty solid. I mean, he's a good guy. It sucks that he's stuck in Carolina, and we know how much that offense stinks. But bringing Kenneth Gainwell back is really going to give a ton of confidence with that coaching staff. So I would expect when he's back, he's fully healthy. He's the guy. So really the way that fantasy owners should be attacking the squad is exactly the part of what we talk about with handcuffs, where you need to ensure that you have both those running backs. And then you have Rashad Penny, who's another piece into it. But I wouldn't be too concerned about Penny. I think he's more the guy, should you actually lose one of the others, then you have that Penny handcuff. But if you are really one of these Philadelphia owners, you have to make sure you have Kenneth Gainwell and you have Rashad Penny. So last week, we saw no Kenneth Gainwell, and DeAndre Swift stepped in and lit it up. So that run game can absolutely be executed with either of those running backs. Just got to go with the guy who's most healthy, and that's who that coaching staff is going to trust. So we had that going on with the offense. Other piece of that offense that we saw going on was Devontae Smith. So we saw a lot of good coverage against the number one receiver of the opposing team of Minnesota. So, and this is something that happened last week with Tampa Bay as well. So, so you had last week you had the Vikings play against Tampa Bay, And there was very little Mike Evans in that game, except for a blip in the second quarter where Mike Evans caught a few receptions. He scored on that drive, and that was pretty much it for the day. Minnesota runs pretty much a single high nickel zone coverage. And what that does is it really focuses on that number one receiver and doesn't allow them much production. So Mike Evans, not much outside of that game. Then you come to the Thursday night game against Philadelphia, and pretty much there's very little production out of A.J. Brown. So A.J. Brown has like 4 receptions. I want to say about 30 to 40 yards receiving, very little going on there. But the number 2 receiver takes off. So I know in week 1, Tampa Bay had more production going on with Chris Godwin as well. So now in week 2, Devontae Smith really lights it up with Jalen Hurts, and granted, they played in college together too. But it seems like the Achilles heel of this single high nickel zone coverage scheme that Mike Flores runs with Vikings is that number 2 wideout. Not really the slot receivers. And granted, these are 2 teams that are somewhat similar, where they have very little production going on out of the slot between Olamide Zaccheaus, and then with Philly, you're looking at Quez Watkins, kind of a go kind of guy. Anyways, so it's just kind of a weird situation with those slot receivers on those teams. But there, the number 2 wideouts cause the damage. So look at that for when you're doing future matchups against Minnesota, maybe even some best ball or some daily fantasy matchups as well. You might want to go with the number 2 receivers on teams that are high scoring and have very little slot receiver production. It's probably a good matchup. So that's what we got out of that game. So still waiting on Triggs, still working with what he's got with the computer going on. But there we go. So let's go to another Sunday night or Sunday game with the Seattle Seahawks and the Detroit Lions. Pretty much a back and forth game. Later in this game, you had DK Metcalf go down and get banged up, but you still had pretty solid offensive lines going on, especially with the run games of both these teams. So with Seattle, as long as Kenneth Walker is healthy, you're going to see more out of him, and you're going to see him behind that really good offensive line make some good plays. So he did pretty well with 2 scores. Not too much on the yards per carry, but still, we know how Seattle likes to run things. They like to play good defense, and they like to run the ball. You look at Detroit's side, and David Montgomery did some damage. David Montgomery also got hurt. So if you're one of those Jahmyr Gibbs owners who's concerned about that production of Gibbs, now that production is going to uptick. Is it going to be the same kind of style, though, that Montgomery plays with Gibbs? Probably not. Gibbs is not that kind of power back that Montgomery is, even though it is a great offensive line. How much of that is going to play? And plus, Gibbs is a rookie. It is a heavy workload coming into this NFL season. So that's really what you got going on there. So there you go. But looking again at Detroit's side, yet another big Amon-Ra St. Brown day, 6 receptions for 100+ yards. Then you had the connection that Jared Goff is most comfortable with, Josh Reynolds. That is his guy from back in his days in LA. Josh Reynolds has been with Jared Goff longer than any other receiver. So big connections there. He had 2 scores out of Reynolds, and he might actually be that handcuff for those owners of Amon-Ra St. Brown. I know I pointed out Jameson Williams in a previous YouTube video, but looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown and kind of what would I want if I lost an Amon-Ra St. Brown? For now, it's Josh Reynolds. Again, you have that familiarity, and you have big games. Reynolds has had good games in the past, so he is a guy that definitely should be owned in all leagues, regardless of size. So that's what you got going on with that team. So we got that. Let's look at another game. And yeah, so let's move around here. Let's see who we got. And looks like another game that I want to talk about is the Buccaneers and the Bears. So again, like what I was talking about last week, how like Mike Evans really has that production. And again, this week he did it again. Just even took off even more than last week. So last week we saw the Bears go up against the Packers. You saw in that game that Romeo Doubs, who in that game, let's call him the number one receiver because Christian Watson was out. Doubs had a really good game last week. Now you look at Mike Evans and the Buccaneers this week, and that number one receiver took off again. And Evans just exploded. We're talking 6 receptions for 170 yards and a score. So big stuff out of him. Even in the backfield with Rachaad White, you had over 70 yards rushing and a score himself. Just big time production out of the Buccaneers, and just a total letdown on offense out of Chicago. You're looking at Justin Fields completing just over half of his passes, 2 interceptions, terrible quarterback rating. It's very confusing what's going on here. And I am one of those DJ Moore owners out there. I thought that DJ Moore coming to Chicago would be the best quarterback experience that DJ Moore has played with. And we are not seeing that. We are not seeing a strong progression out of Justin Fields. And in the preseason, too, all we saw really was maybe a couple of good screen passes, and then they took him out of the game. So were they really like confident in him, or did they just think that, hey, we don't want to show too much, or do we just not want to show much at all because there's not really much going on here, and we don't want teams getting a good read on Justin Fields, and maybe he's not that great. So very confusing stuff we got going on with Chicago. Really rough situation, and it's a tough read there. But hey, look at the South. Look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, they are 2-0. They're playing somewhat okay defense, and they have it going on offensively. So they have their guys between Evans and Godwin. They had some good tight end play. Cade Otton took in 6 receptions. So there's some really good things going on with that Tampa Bay offense. Even looking at Baker Mayfield, I mean, he had over 300 yards passing, only 1 score, but no picks. Just a solid day out of Baker Mayfield. You're going to get some rushing yards out of him. Not much in this game, but he's always a threat for that as well. So pretty good stuff you got going on with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I like what we got going on there with that team. All right, so looking at another game. Again, we're waiting on TRIGGS. Yeah, he's got some tough computer stuff, but we're here. We're charging along, and we're just gonna keep moving. All right, so let's go to California. Speaking of the shirt that I'm wearing right now, and let's look at those 49ers against the LA Rams. So I think the big takeaway out of this game is that for fantasy owners that were hot on the waiver wire week 1, took in Kyren Williams, again, he produces. So he gets you 52 yards on the ground and a score. Just a big day out of him. And then looking at the opposite side of the ball with another good offensive line with a team that really scores in Christian McCaffrey. And that is the guy that both TRIGGS and myself think is going to be the most bona fide value player in fantasy this season. So huge things going on there with this game. Again, you got Puka Nacua is looking really hot to start this year. Just really good stuff you got going on with these 2 teams offensively. And we didn't really expect that out of LA. We didn't expect Matt Stafford to be as solid as he was in terms of juice, I guess. So again, another 300-yard plus game out of Stafford. A little more riskier with the ball, 2 interceptions. And again, a lot of our people in the Midwest watching, you definitely saw that in Detroit. He can get wild with it. He can sling it. but he can also throw it into tight situations that aren't always the smartest and not always the lightest coverage to deal with. So he paid with that for a little bit here, but it's just good seeing that volume come out of LA. So they may not be the best defense, but they are trying to cover that on offense. And maybe that comes in the future with them running the ball even more with Kyren Williams. We do know that there is that situation going on with Cam Akers and that team, Cam Akers and Sean McVay. But still, if you have Kyren Williams, you want Cam Akers, you want to have both those guys. It seems like that's a situation that if they have to go to one of those backs and score points, they're going to do it. They're not going to just wait on either of them. They're going to keep that train rolling. So yeah, that's what you got going there. But yeah, I mean, a little bit of a down game from Brock Purdy from last week. I thought Purdy would be a guy that I would want for fantasy. He was a guy I thought about, but I chose to go Jared Goff and Kenny Pickett. And I know right now in our Cleveland Steelers game, I want to say there was a pick six, or there was some kind of interception back in the Pittsburgh territory from Pickett. So we'll see what's going on. But this is going to be a tough game out of Cleveland and Pittsburgh, and it's going to be tough going against that Cleveland defense. So yeah, we'll see how that game goes as we go along here. All right, so we got that game down, and let's go to another one. So let's hit up a pretty wild one that went down in the desert, and let's check out that Giants Cardinals game. And this was a game that just looked like it was going to repeat itself out of the Giants. For the longest time, they could not score a point. And then finally, late in that second quarter, they finally got their first touchdown out of, I want to say that was Daniel Jones with a quarterback rush. And yep, it was. So we got that there. And then they just kind of kept pushing along. So they got later in that game, they got more scores, but Arizona started so hot, and then they just couldn't really score again. They started with 7, and I mean, they went into halftime up 20-0, and actually, boy, it was even higher than that. It was 28-0 at one point in the third quarter, and then the wheels just totally fell off, and they could not score again. But like, for the people out there who are really thinking that James Conner could be a very interesting middle of your draft pick, it's paying off. I mean, he's had 2 really solid games to start the year, 100 plus yards on the ground, another touchdown. He's looking pretty solid. Not too much out of the quarterback play out of Josh Dobbs, but he is a guy who can run an offense. And my takeaway from this team from the preseason is that this team might actually have a good offensive line. And I can see it already just from the basic box score of Josh Dobbs. I mean, there's no sacks from him at all in this game. So it already is telling me that like there is good pass protection there. They may not have the best offense or the best overall weapons to throw to, but there is some nice protection here. So if it is a week where you are looking to stream someone, maybe you're playing some daily fantasy action going on, this might be a team that you go at because you can trust their offensive line for having good pass protection and good run blocking for James Conner. Or if it's not Conner and it's another running back, you can trust that running back should have a good day, unless you're playing the Jets or the Bills or the Dallas Cowboys. Then you probably want to hold off on that. But other than that, there's some interesting things that you can take away from the Cardinals on this. I think a cool thing that I liked with the Giants is now we're starting to see a little bit more out of Jalen Hyatt. Not too many receptions, but he is slowly working his way into this offense. And just in terms of yardage, he's really starting to take the top off of defenses. He had 2 receptions for almost 90 yards. That's it. But at some point, you're looking at a guy who's probably your next version of Chris Olave. This is a receiving core that he can definitely work his way up. The only receiver, like the highest ranked receiver in terms of receptions ahead of Jalen Hyatt's 2 for 90 yards, is some combination of 4 receptions between Isaiah Hodgins and then 4 receptions out of Paris Campbell. That's it. Darius Slayton had 3, and then Sterling Shepard had 1, and then obviously Darren Waller had a good amount at 6. But that's actually the same amount of receptions on the Arizona side that Zach Ertz had. So when I look at this as a very diverse passing scheme, and it's looking like they just need some time to figure it out. They just need to figure out what's going on here, because last season it was pretty much Slayton and Hodgins. They went with those guys, and then they knew about it. Daniel Jones was very comfortable with it. He had Saquon Barkley for a good amount of the season. The games they had, they were good. But now things are different, and especially going into next week without Saquon, they're going to be even more pass dependent. So there's going to be Matt Breida, but how is this going to look without the threat of Saquon Barkley? That's what we'll see. So we'll have to look at who New York's playing against next week. If someone already knows that and wants to chime in, let me know, and we can look into that. But there you go. So we got the Giants-Cardinals game down. So that's a game. All right. So we got a few more games left here. We got some Commanders Broncos action going on, in a wild finish in that game. I was pretty bummed out about the way that game ended. I don't want to sound too tinfoil hatty, but when I see clear pass interference at the end of that game and no one's calling it, I definitely have a right to be suspicious about what's going on with that game, because you hate to see a game that has a cool ending to it, that has a chance at a really cool comeback, basically coming up short because a network wants to get to network scheduling. And that's what we saw out of the Commanders Broncos game. But a really cool game. Yes, a good chunk of this yardage out of Russell Wilson is from the Hail Mary that ended that game. But it is what it is. I mean, we look at the other side of the ball too, and Sam Howell had a pretty decent day to start. So yeah, it's just kind of different how that game's going along. But looking at the Washington side, we started to see a real big surge in the trust of Brian Robinson, and even the fact that he's doing well without that many carries is more confidence that it's no longer Antonio Gibson. It is all in on Brian Robinson. You had probably one gadget play out of Curtis Samuel, but other than that, you have Brian Robinson running for basically 90 yards on almost 20 carries and 2 scores. So right there, you're looking at about a 4.5 yard average per carry. That's very good sign for that run blocking scheme that they have going on with the Commanders. Looking at the receiving side, Terry McLaurin's back. He's healthy. He had one of the 2 receiving touchdowns for Washington. And then you had Logan Thomas, who went down in this game as well. So you have that going on there. But then looking at the opposite side of the ball, looking at Denver and how they received, Marvin Mims stepping up, total guy that I wanted to draft. And I just didn't have my strategy fully intact, but I knew with how things were going with Denver, Marvin Mims was a huge pick for the Broncos in the draft. He's a 3rd round pick. When you see a second or third round wide receiver being drafted, that means that team wants to get him into the starting lineup as soon as possible. And you're really starting to see that pay dividends with the Broncos. So 100+ yard receiving day, 1 score. This guy is really a big time receiver. Jerry Jeudy was back, but Jerry Jeudy's coming off a hamstring. That's not something that you're like, boom, I'm back. Let's go. Let's take the top off of defense. A hamstring, they're going to ease you back. You're not going to get as much volume as as a player that's actually healthy. So you're not going to have many receptions, and you're not going to have many snaps on the field when you're a player coming off of a hamstring injury. So even more confidence that you should have in the guys that are healthy, especially like a Marvin Mims. Brandon Johnson had 2 scores in this game, but Johnson is just not really a guy that's as high up on the depth chart as a Mims or a Cortland Sutton or a Jerry Jeudy. So it's kind of what you got going on there with this game. So we got that going on there. And then let's look at the nightcap. So let's look at what we got here in the Dolphins and Patriots. So if we look at this game, we can kind of see what's going on here with these teams and see what's going on. So just checking in on my guy Triggs, seeing if he's got anything else going on here. I think he's still battling against the Wizards at Microsoft, but he'll figure it out. So I believe in Triggs. I know he can do it. So looking at Miami, this is by far the most dynamic offense in the AFC East, if not for the entire AFC. They've scored a ton of points. I want to say they are over 60 in 2 games. So you're looking at an offense that can average almost 30 points a game. And that's a threat that you bring when you bring in a guy like a Tyreek Hill and you have Jalen Waddle opposite side of the field. Well, this week it wasn't so much about those guys, especially that Patriots defense really honing in on Tyreek Hill, making sure that he wouldn't have a big day, and really focusing in on that opened up things for the run game. Raheem Mostert just had an absolute day, 120 yards on the ground and 2 scores. Just a monstrous kind of day. Not as much out of Tua Tagovailoa that we saw last week, but you're still getting about 250 yards passing, a touchdown, and a pick. And then on the opposite side of all, you get that out of Mac Jones. You had almost the exact same box score of a Tua Tagovailoa. So this was more of a gritty kind of trenches kind of matchup between the backs, but you just have Miami coming out on top on this. So pretty good stuff going on. You do get that 1 touchdown out of Tyreek Hill, so that's pretty nice. But it is what it is. I mean, it's the Raheem Mostert show, and I think you got to look at that. You got to look at, if you're a Miami running back owner, you got to look at it as if this is a game where that defense can definitely be focusing on the receiving core, and they have the ability to keep up with the legs of Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, and they have maybe a few gaps in the interior line. Can those guys like Mostert and Jeff Wilson get through? There you go. Maybe when Devin Achane comes back from health and has a little more reps going on in that backfield, that he's a guy who can just absolutely explode with a burst of speed. And he's perfect for that Mike McDaniels offense, that maybe you get something out of that there. So we know big takeaway in this game was Jalen Waddle. So Jalen Waddle had a concussion in this game, and that probably takes him out of the game next week. So got to do a little more research into that, see what's going on with Jalen Waddle and that Dolphins offense. But if that's going on, then teams will definitely be able to put more attention on Tyreek Hill and not have to worry about Jalen Waddle taking off the top of the defense on the opposite side. So that might peel back this offense a little bit. I don't know. It's going to be different. Got to see who Miami plays against next week. But if you're a defense going up against Miami, you're like, okay, cool. Possibly no Jalen Waddle. This might make things a little bit easier for us. So whoever you have with Miami players outside of Tua Tagovailoa, if you took Tua, you're committed. You are riding that train, and you're going for that ride, as choppy as it may be, but it can have huge dividends like we saw in week 1. But the other ones, look at those matchups. Look at if he's a guy, whether it's Tyreek Hill or Mostert, really look at those matchups and think about how those teams are going to play against them. Tomorrow, check in with us, and Triggs and I, with a good computer, good internet, I know he's going to make it. We will break down each of these games. Plus, we're going to go down our box score of how many wins and losses does Triggs and I have. Haven't done that yet. We want to start including that in our videos. If you get a chance, check out our one of our newer shorts and how we broke down the Philadelphia Eagles and Minnesota Vikings game from Thursday night. We want to do that for every game this season. Put out maybe 4 or 5 of those each day leading up to Thursday Night Football, and really give you some good insights on kind of how you want to dissect these teams and what kind of things you want to look for depending which players you have from those teams. So I think that's a really helpful thing to help you guys. And they're short. They're really, really short. They're going to loop, easy to come back to, and really digest what takeaways you want to learn from those games. So good stuff there. And that's it. So we got all the games covered for the week, except for the doubleheader Monday night action going on between the Saints Panthers and Browns Steelers. So that's what we got going on. I guess one other thing that I want to touch on for just a little bit is these coaches that are kind of running certain players into the ground that aren't in any opportunity to win a football game. So we saw it out of my Raiders and Devontae Adams getting late. I left that game when I saw that game being like a 3-touchdown, 4-touchdown score, and there was very little time left in the fourth quarter. At that point, just pull your guys off the field. It's over. And then in the Jets-Cowboys game, when that game was clearly out of hand, you had a really, really deep pass going on to Garrett Wilson in double coverage with like 3 minutes left, and he totally gets clocked. And that's your franchise. That's your franchise. That's your season. You are not going to win games without Garrett Wilson, flat out. So I don't know what's going on with Josh McDaniels and Robert Saleh making those calls, trying to show toughness or trying to show that you're tough. I don't get it. There comes a point when, I mean, we watch plenty of NBA games and we'll see teams just getting blown out of the water by like 40 with 10 minutes left. And those players are off the court. They're done. They're gone. They're done for the night. That's it. So if the NBA has no qualms about pulling their stars off the court with plenty of time left in the fourth quarter, then why are the stars on the field of an NFL game with 3 minutes left and have no chance to win those games whatsoever? So just a little food for thought. Definite concern if you're a Garrett Wilson fan or if you are a Devontae Adams fan, that those guys are going to be out there 24/7, win, loss, or draw. So it's going to help you in some weeks, but this week it definitely hurt, especially with going up against pretty good defenses in the Dallas Cowboys and the Buffalo Bills. So there you go. So yeah, that's pretty much everything we got for a show for tonight. Yeah, we'll be back tomorrow with Triggs. Little tough one going on here, but be sure you guys come back tomorrow. We'll be back here 7 o'clock Central. I'll have Triggs. We'll be all good. We'll be back here, and yeah, so that's that, and yeah, we'll see you here tomorrow. So tomorrow 7 o'clock, right here, Twitter, Facebook, or what's YouTube? There you go. Obviously, the other obvious one. So be sure to follow us down here. Subscribe. Check us out here. Again, we got Instagram, TikTok, X, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. You're looking for it, we're there. So I'm Steve M3TR1CS. Got my guy DJ Triggs. We'll see you tomorrow. That's no debate.